Hello and welcome to A Day in the Life. I'm your host, Darren Bloomfield. Joining me today is Zack, co-founder at Feathery. Zack, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, excited to be here.
Definitely. Well, just disclosure at the time of the recording, I'm 2 weeks to joining the team. So really excited to be here and just wanted to dive in and get some more insight into the founding of the company and just kind of your background overall.
Yeah, totally. Let's do it.
So, just kind of generally, we just like to give a rough overview of just kind of like your career path and just kind of how your prior experience was able to lead you into, this current role. And just again, just being very like entrepreneurial of, founding a company. Like, how did that kind of come to be?
Yeah, I would say it was through a lot of experience working at startups. That's kind of what got me to realize that I really like it. So I've always been really into kind of doing multiple things, right? I think doing just one thing every day, day in, day out, kind of got boring for me. And that was, evident through just growing up and just like my personality. And so in general, like the idea of like starting a business was always interesting to me, but was always a question of when, not if. And so, yeah, kind of joined a few startups. And the biggest company I worked at was Nextdoor, but I'd interned previously at a bunch of kind of startups. And Nextdoor was still like 400 employees. That's probably the biggest company I've worked at. Besides that, just really like the idea of kind of seeing the full end to end of what I'm working on. And so my roles have always been a mix of product and go to market. So, I was a product manager where I kind of worked on a lot of different aspects of a product from like the design to like what we should even work on in the first place to like how we actually promote the features. And Nextdoor was like a very different company. That was like a social consumer company, right? So like a social network for a neighborhood. High
Mhm.
Touch was more of B2B SaaS kind of startup that was, growing like crazy. So I've seen a little bit of different aspects of very different roles. And after doing it a few times and seeing a few, companies kind of scale, I was like, all right, now's the right time to just do it, from the ground up. And so that's a little bit about kind of what, my careers looked like.
Yeah, definitely. I think a big career step for you is, actually moving to like San Francisco, just picking up, kind of relocating, really getting immersed kind of in, that culture, that environment, and just kind of, bumping elbows with kind of everyone who's doing what you wanted to do. Can you kind of talk, about that?
Yeah, I would say that's a huge reason why I realized, I wanted to work in startups is because one summer internship, I was able to kind of come out to San Francisco and live here for a summer working at a startup. And yeah, it was kind of, that was reassuring to me that this is the right path, that I really liked it, that, the energy around me of like people who are just thinking about doing, cool things like this is, it's just so fun. Like, and that's why I've stayed in San Francisco for like almost 6 years. And so yeah, just signed a new lease literally this morning. So staying
Awesome.
for, for another year. So I think I just enjoyed that a lot. And that was definitely just the fact that your peers are working in startups, the venture capital is right there. Like I often worked out of VC offices because like had friends who worked in VC. Like it's always kind of just everyone's just thinking in that mindset.
Yeah, definitely. And just to kind of touch more on just the timing of things, just kind of in constant like technology improvements and now, AI automation. Like, I mean, ChatGPT was almost founded like 2 years to the day, like November 30th, 2022. So like how instrumental was kind of, new technology like ChatGPT and other tools for Feathery and then also just kind of for like the tech space like in general.
Yeah, I would say it just expands on your existing value props so much more, right? So Feathery, you've always been focused on data intake, for example. That's always been our focus. And what AI lets us do is actually tackle more ambitious data intake problems, right? So let's take the example of insurance underwriting, right? If it was just previously pre-chat GPT and pre-language models, we could of course build data intake workflows to collect data via forms, but now with the AI kind of evolution, we can read really messy unstructured documents. like, submission intake, workflows that were previously, would have been still manual in some way with Feathery now can be almost entirely kind of moved to straight through processing. So really like what it means is like it makes our value prop even more sticky, right? But it also actually in some ways doesn't change some things, which is like the core aspect of our platform, which is like the integrations, the flexibility, allowing people to come in and configure the workflow to exactly how their business operates. That still is, really, really valuable. It's not like AI got, changed that value prop of our product. It just added more on top of like what we've already built out and also actually accelerated our business a lot because it made everything else even more sticky. Because if Feathery can use AI in some ways to collect the data, let's say, and use it to read these unstructured documents, actually doing something with that data, the integrations, like the kind of value props of the whole workflow became even stronger. So yeah, I'd say
Yeah.
it's been a really, a force multiplier for us. But it hasn't changed too much where like we're like, I don't describe Feathery as an AI company, when I talk about Feathery, because a lot of what we do isn't necessarily just AI, right? It's just a key part of what we do. It's part of the workflow, but it's not the whole thing. And that's also
Yeah,
what
I mean,
makes it stand out.
it's just a feature that, we can add on to our products and just kind of like timeline wise, just get an understanding. Like Feathery was co-founded, around a year or so before ChatGPT even came out. So when you guys, you and Peter are heads down, building out the product, like what was that kind of like to kind of, discover like, ChatGPT coming out when you're, in the middle of building, the software?
Yeah, I mean, it came out in kind of different variations, right? Because like, first off, we're like, very focused on the form builder, right? Kind of the core part of our product, and so we were thinking about it from the standpoint of how do we use AI to make it more easy to build forms, right? So this is again because AI was when it first came out, like Chat GPT, things like that. It wasn't GPT-3 was is very different from GPT 4.0 and the 4.0 models and stuff that's out right now. Now oh 01, right? Like so it was good at like some things, but it wasn't great at others. So we were using it originally as like we have we still have this feature. You can upload a PDF and then generate a form version of it, like a digital version of the PDF. So it was good at that. It could read the PDF and like, extract, fields from it in a decent way, or like use it to generate new questions for a form. But it was still like not good enough to do really more complex things. So that was the first
Yeah.
iteration, right? So, and again, it was not like viewed as like a whole game changer for a product. It was like, oh, AI is cool. Like it's kind of a nice, thing. It was like a quick sprint for an engineer. It wasn't like, oh, let's pivot the whole company or anything like that, right? But where we started getting a lot more demand from our insurance customers and our wealth management customers, be like, hey, we have all these unstructured documents. Can Feathery do something about it? Because like, they're already using us for some forms. They wanted to use us for kind of more document intake. And so that's kind of where, our gears started turning about, okay, actually really investing in, leveraging our own product for that more unstructured, messy data intake. So again, it was pulled from customers, but it also aligned with when AI actually got good enough to be able to handle that. So it's
Yeah.
kind of a mix of both. But yeah, that's kind of how it affected us. But it wasn't like, I wouldn't say like completely changed our trajectory from like what we were working on, like Peter and I, as we were building out the company or anything like that.
Yeah, definitely. And just kind of, generally from, what I've experienced in these, couple short weeks, just overall, like, insurance, especially very like established carriers and brokers tend to be kind of, legacy systems focused, slow to, make changes to technology. Obviously, like, I mean, we're in a business of managing risk, so I totally like
Mhm.
understand it to an extent. But just kind of, prediction wise, just from, what I've seen, there's like very few companies that we've talked to that have already been leveraging a similar solution. There's only really one company so far that we've talked to who's actually like been developing a product like in-house, like internally. And then, most companies that we've talked to are just kind of starting to kick around the idea of like what AI automation can actually like do to them. Like
Mhm.
what is kind of in your mind, what do you kind of see of like a timeline to adoption, like mass adoption, like in insurance, for like brokers and carriers kind of leverage like AI? Because right now, kicking around, around 2 years, and some companies now are just like rolling out, their version of ChatGPT, right? Like blah
Yep.
blah blah GBT. So, you know, it's taken them around 2 years to do that, right?
Yeah.
Like what do you think's gonna happen? Because I think at some point, like either you're gonna have to use AI in your business, automation in your business, or you're just gonna get like left behind.
Yeah, I think there's like phases, right? So phase one is kind of what we're talking about, I think, Darren, which is like people, and this is like probably most companies, people are using Chat GPT on the kind of single player mode. Like an underwriter might use Chat GPT as a part of their workflow to like look up a company and like ask them questions about it. But it's like just them as a part of their siloed workflow. Right. That's kind of phase one where a lot of companies are at today, if they're even there, right? I think phase two, and this is where in the world that Feathery is creating and really pushing, is Feathery basically, or any company basically, using AI as a systematic part of an automation of like an end-to-end process. So submission intake is an example, quote comparisons or, policy comparisons, that kind of stuff. Like getting to that point, it's challenging because you have to actually, it's not just one off. You have to like figure out what are all the edge cases or what are all the kind of core workflows in general for how you want to use AI. And that's not just the AI piece. Example would be like, where does the data even come from in the first place for these processes? And then once the data comes in, how do you then use AI to kind of analyze that data? And then the integrations, how do you get that data once in this kind of more structured format from a messy document or anything like that into your Guidewire, your core system, your AMS. So that those are like harder problems, right? It's easy to just throw Chat GPT at an individual underwriter and it's useful, but the value is limited because each underwriter or each person is left to figure out how they want to use it. And some people
Yeah.
might be open to kind of figuring that out, but they still have to like figure out the queries each time, et cetera. Whereas like this next phase, I think of where AI is going, and this is like we got when what Feathery is pushing as well, is truly like the whole workflow being reimagined with AI, right? So some of the stuff we're doing with submission intake is an example. The data is coming in from to a submission inbox, but everything after that, so that the broker behavior is the same, but everything after that is a whole different model, right? Getting closer to like, AI reading the submission, calling out when things are missing, that's very, very different from the workflow today where people are often, using a BPO or an outsourced agency, in another country to review those submissions and do a lot of manual effort. So like, honestly, like that workflow involves a lot of pieces. There's clearance, there's, the actual reading of the data, there's running the underwriting logic, like getting all that glue to work together in a reliable way with AI is hard. It's hard work. That's why most folks haven't done it yet because it's, of like, and that's kind of where the tools like Feathery help make that way easier. And so I think that's the next phase. I think, especially because ultimately, like when you think about, speed to market and speed to lead for, like, let's say an underwriter or like the carrier specifically, right? If your competitors are taking 5 minutes to respond to a quote, or maybe even, not even 5 minutes, 30 seconds, and you're still the carrier, the one carrier, the basically like the snowball effect is really there, right? Where like as more and more carriers adopt AI and you're the one left out, like your agency and your producer partners are going to realize that and get used to
Yeah.
the behavior of like getting a quote in five minutes and you're going to be left out.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the ease of doing business. Like, I mean, obviously,
Yeah.
people want to do business with, people that they like, and also people that they work well with. So, if
Yeah.
your systems and kind of your workflow has just become so outdated with time, then you as a carrier are just gonna, spend more and more money on, like you said, the offshore resources and trying to speed things up with like, manpower, quote unquote, versus like actually turning to technology and actually making that investment that's like scalable, right? There's only so much work that like a person can do with like these tasks, right? Especially when it can just be, programmed to happen with our software.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's like the phases right now. Like that's phase one is currently today, solo chat GPTs. Phase two is actually AI embedded into reimagining the whole end-to-end workflow. What happens after that, that's anyone's guess. I think like I think it's gonna eat like insurance specifically, there's just so many workflows to tackle that even that phase two will take like 5 to 10 years, into like getting everything into a good spot. I think phase three, honestly, is like basically once you have all that, automation in place, right? I think it's just back to the basics, like back to like relationship building, back to, using all the data that comes in for better pricing. It's just like, insurance stays as insurance. It's just more efficient.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that's just reflecting on like my time as an underwriter, like the extent that I was using ChatGPT was like very limited, like, to help write some emails, to, get ready for like carrier meetings or like insured meetings, and just kind of help prepare questions, for a client or like a potential insured. But outside of that, like as you're saying, like right now it's very like individual based, how one person in a company wants to use, this technology like independently. But if obviously like if you were to implement these time saving strategies, efficiency, strategies company wide or department wide, or even just on like one line of business like cyber, like that would just be like very game changing as far as you said, reducing the time to get a quote out. The less time it takes for you to get a quote out, the more likely you are to bind the business. And then also, like, that's driving revenue. And then also, like, on the expense side, like, if you are able to automate these processes and not rely so heavily on offshore resources, then that'll in turn lower your expenses.
Yeah, and I think the bind rate increase is obviously the sexier value prop, right? And that's like super important. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll catch some attention. Yeah. And then just generally, like, just reflecting on my own career path, around 3 or so years like out of college, just like obviously like there's a lot of students, whether they're in like risk management insurance or just kind of in like IT kind of majors, like computer science. Like I think just there's so many jobs. Like, I'm a student going to college now. I'm thinking what's my career going to be like, but with like the changes in technology that we've experienced, like over a few like short years, like, when I was in college, I wouldn't have thought that I would be, selling software at a SaaS company, right? Because like this company didn't exist yet, right? So like, what what kind of like advice would you have for students as far as like say like myself with like underwriting brokerage background and now coming to the tech side to support underwriters and brokers, like what would you kind of say to these students of how to really like open their minds to the possibility of like the job that they're going to have after graduation or in their career might not like exist yet.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is like the nice part, right? I think, that with the technology kind of curve is that the unsexy parts of these jobs are getting automated away. And that's a great thing, right? That because that means that like, if you were to enter in as an underwriter today, and maybe in 5 years from now, you will be spending more of your time actually underwriting and not, actually doing data entry or parts that take away from the core parts of most jobs. So I think like in general, I think as as technology adopts, basically jobs become more high leverage. And that's exciting, right? So I think that's in general, like, there will still be a lot of the jobs today, they'll just be higher leverage, maybe a smaller team a little bit. And so that's a good thing, but maybe more. I think like in general, AI is a force multiplier, meaning like there will be maybe more, in smaller kind of companies that are operating with like less people, but like, each person's much more efficient. And so I think that's exciting. I think, yeah, like the world is changing a lot. I think like to the question of like what advice honestly is just um adopting technology today and being like a super user of technology is probably the best thing you can do, right? Like get used to like using chat gpt and like don't shy away from it, use it, and make yourself 10x faster in whatever you do, and that's how you stay competitive. So I think like just how the internet was a great tool for us to like if you use the internet, you can learn so much more than somebody else who didn't have that. With this new tool, use it to like be so much more knowledgeable about so many different random things that are relevant. So yeah, I think that's the number one thing, right? Like there's exciting parts about your work that's going to come up. That's people 10 years ago had to do manual stuff, you don't have to do anymore. But then also the kind of, it's a blessing and a curse, but I think it's mostly a blessing that you will be expected to output more, but that's because you have tools that are making you way faster. So you'll just be kind of like really, really efficient. Like you as a person will be doing the work of 10 people, but you won't be putting in 10, 10 extra hours. Like the
Yeah,
in the
it would just
same
get done in your
situation.
same day. I mean, just kind of seeing what we've done for some of our carrier partners of like the streamlined end-to-end solutions of like, essentially like there's really no need to underwrite out of your email anymore, right? Like you're not looking in your email, digging through, 10, 15 broker submissions, trying to find the right opportunity to work on, the opportunity that's most likely to bind, right? Because I mean, as an underwriter, time is your most valuable asset. And if you have to waste so much time actually like finding the deal that
Yeah.
actually is a deal, and then just kind of seeing what we've done as far as like, you know, they're underwriting on accused. Like some of our carrier partners are replaced that whole system and they're writing on accused and they're able to assign accounts to underwriters on the team and just streamline like that whole workflow. And especially with like our ability to, use logic to kind of show like, oh, this is an inappetite submission, this is not an
Yeah.
inappetite submission, this is a decline, and being able to automate that process gets feedback to the brokers much quicker.
Totally. Yeah. I think it's an exciting time for sure.
And then just overall, like the life cycle of like a startup, like obviously there's the idea, and then there's kind of the raising capital, and then can you kind of touch on like the first deal, right? Like actually making that first dollar in revenue.
Yeah. I would say, that the first, I can talk kind of about the first few deals. It kind of just came through one like design partnerships, right? So before Feathery was like a full product yet, we had to, you know, build with some customers in mind, right? So we had a few customers in financial services that were kind of looking for a new solution for forms and were willing to kind of take a bet on us as a startup and be like, hey, we know your product's still being built. So like we'll work with you and we'll give you, of course, like a cheaper price than usual. In exchange, they will give us tons of product feedback and use our product in like an earlier state. And that's how most startups kind of start, right? They have a few design partners, that's like the term, right? They're kind of designing, you're building a product, you want to make it, basically adjustable for a lot of customers, but you only have maybe a handful in the beginning, right? So that's what we had, right? So, a few companies and like actually we had insurance companies, so a few like, lending slash kind of wealth customers. So, in that kind of still in the same kind of target audience. But yeah, I mean, it was obviously like they would give us feedback and then we'd iterate on that feedback and ship new features for them the same day, right? Like, oh, customers like, oh, like I need support for conditional logic. Great. Shipped, like try it out, It's really like that fast feedback loop that made our product really, really robust. So I think that was just like, that was like the beginning of the whole company. It's just like you're working with design partners, and then we of course launched more broadly, and then really started focusing on our core audience, like insurance, right? And then going to insurance conferences, getting more specialized, all that kind of stuff. So really, it was kind of honing in on the a handful, let's say 5 to 10 customers that were design partners, and now we're like you know much more flexible. And thanks to them and their feedback, we made the product super, super robust.
Yeah, definitely. So I mean, from what I've experienced on kind of our like sales cycle here is like I think a big element of it is really like figuring out like discovery, right? As far as like
Mm-hmm.
what is a company, a potential client currently doing, and how can we tailor our products and our offerings to really meet them where we're at and really understand like their priorities. Like, can you kind of touch on your experience of really like educating potential customers or clients, like as far as like these products are very complex. It's kind of a big decision for a manager an ops person to really take it on and really steer the company in a different direction, kind of a little bit put a target on themselves a little bit, like, hey, this is my leap of faith, let's invest this X amount of dollars into this, and there'll be some ROI there. Like, how do you kind of help customers kind of take that leap?
Yeah, I'd say the biggest thing is discovery, like you said, like being really curious and understanding where they're coming from. Because if you don't know that, then you won't be able to really give them recommendations to begin with. So being really curious, that's personally my favorite part of my job because I get to like really learn about how different customers are solving problems today. And so that's number one. And then number two is, once you understand their current challenges, really helping them visualize. Like our product is very visual, right? You have to see it. You have to actually build out the workflow to understand it. So we actually are very hands-on even before someone's a real customer of ours. We're almost like consultants. Help them really kind of we build out some example workflows for whatever to basically help them reimagine. Okay, we know their pain point today. Here's what a new version of this could look like. For submission intake, for underwriting, or for et cetera, for comparing different quotes and policies. So that's really like the being curious and then showing them in our product what they're actually getting themselves into and being really generous with letting them test. Like we're not the kind of company that's going to be like, hey, you have to pay us money before you get any, sense of how the product works. We're super generous with our time and resources with people who aren't even customers yet. So they understand and kind of understand one, that we are very helpful people and want to help you, and two, like really know what are they actually potentially signing up for.
Yeah, definitely that makes sense. And yeah, I mean I think that's totally correct. Just kind of really, seeing where we can add value and just really understanding like the main pain points like of potential customers. Because I think that's exactly it. Like being able to really have an understanding of what their day-to-day actually is like in that role, or I think sometimes we're very focused on like the end user, like who is that actual, frontline underwriter or broker that's going to have to actually do these, policy and quote comparisons, like, and what would that mean for them to be able to have like a tool to really assist them like in that.
Yeah, totally.
And then just generally, like, what is kind of some, goals for the company, like, going forward, just kind of growth wise and potential, like, product development, like, what do you kind of think Feathery will look like, like 5 or so, years from now?
Yeah, I think today we're very focused on submission intake and for carriers, and then we have the policy and quote comparison for brokers. I think right now focus is really important for us to really make sure that we are the best tool, on the market for those use cases, right? And so what that looks like is always continuing to build our integrations, always continue to build our data sources for enrichment, for let's say for submission intake, so that as you get more data, about a care, basically about a new business that's coming in, all that stuff, it matters a lot. And so that's kind of the next, say 1 to 2 years, right? It's very focused on use cases that we see are tons of value, and that, like you said, like the market today, carriers are not, carriers and brokers today are, very few are actually have implemented this stuff yet. They've talked about it. They maybe talked about doing some pilots, but there's so much opportunity to, really, move the needle for this industry. And so, I would say the next 2 years look very much like this past year, but like with a lot more rigor, right? Like us really going to more conferences, us going to, being, just, having more case studies, et cetera, everything just like being bigger and louder for the same thing over and over again. And that's kind of the fun part of, and like, the boring part, but the fun part about founder life is like half your job is just like repeating the same thing over and over again, but it's important because you're kind
Yeah.
of setting the tempo and the
But
tone.
it's all about messaging. Like you
Yeah.
really have to believe, the messaging. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think beyond that, then there's obviously like there's no shortage of workflows in insurance that can help improve, right? Like, in terms of opportunities more on the claim side with claims processing, or opportunity on even just, reimagining. Because really, like we think about what Feathery's doing, right? There's the, policyholder, there's the broker, and it's the carrier. Like Feathery is making it easier for carriers to collect any data sent by the broker, right? And then brokers, in a similar way, we're helping them submit data and analyze data sent from the carrier. So it's this kind of ping pong that we're kind of in between right now. I think the grand vision of Feathery is make data sharing across all three sources as seamless as possible. So that's really where the exciting stuff in terms of, for example, AMS bridging, right? Basically allowing the AMS right system to talk to the core systems of the carriers, So, basically allowing systems to talk to each other, and there's a lot more of opportunities to just, instead of this kind of document handing process that we're doing today, making it more of a system to system data sharing process in an intelligent way with AI under the hood to make sure that, the field from this system is the same as the field from this system, and any kind of basically translation that needs to get done for it to mean the same thing is super important, right? So what that would look like from a, wave a magic wand, what is Feathery enabling in 5 to 10 years is truly policyholder, right? Can share information in whatever format they want to their broker. Broker can then very, very quickly, almost seamlessly in like a few clicks, basically and no document need to be like, forward over, just pure data, right? Being to be able to share it with the carrier and back, right? Basically, get back a quote, right? And actually be able to bind it, all that whole process being like much, much faster and a higher fidelity, right? And that whole piece I think is really exciting. And so really the reason why Feathery today is very focused on like, reading accord form and stuff like that is we don't want to change the behavior because, that will just slow everything down. But over time, as people are more open to these solutions, really just kind of questioning why we even use it, why do we even have to like, send over the same submission document over multiple times, and like questioning some of those core assumptions and figure out how we get to like pure seamless data sharing. That's kind of where I'm really excited. So yeah, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, like, there's nothing worse as an underwriter to get, submission quote please with like an email thread from, an insured or a different broker, and then have, 4 Excel sheets, 10 PDF quotes, and, some random Word doc and like a half filled out attachment for an application. Yeah, I mean, shaking just thinking about it. Yeah, and then just to wrap up here, just kind of advice for entrepreneurs. What's kind of some advice, or just kind of before, if somebody thinks that they want to like start their own tech company, like specifically like how would you kind of help them, process that, and kind of, I mean, again, like I think it's all about like the idea, and then, being a solution to its particular pain point. And then just really having like that vision, like what kind of advice would you have, or, if you could tell, you know, Zach 4 years ago before starting this, like what would you kind of to say
Yeah,
to yourself?
I think number one advice is balancing discovery with action, right? I think that's the biggest thing. So, like my job today is still discovery, always asking questions, trying to understand pain points of customers. But also you need to have enough, so you can do that, for 3 years, 4 years, and still get nowhere. That's a prerequisite to figure out any problems that you want to solve as a company. Like, but the second thing also is conviction, right? Your own conviction that, okay, because you're gonna get, people saying no a lot, but like it's okay because, even for Feathery, right? Like a lot of people would be like, we don't have this problem, etc. But we know that like commercial, submission, intake for carriers is like, but imagine if we were trying to like, we had the same idea and conviction, but for like the wrong audience, the wrong industry, right? That the premise is there, but you have to have conviction and keep searching and searching. So it's really a hard balance to be like, you have to be humble too, right? You can't have so much conviction that like when everyone in the whole world says no, you still keep spending your hours and days on this product that's never going to work. But you also can't be so like, I don't even know, like a leaf in the wind that like,
Yeah.
someone shows you a new problem, you like chase that problem. And that's the hardest problem that I think as a founder you experience in the early days when you're trying to figure out and validate, is this something that's worth doing? So you have to really thread that needle, like be really, really, scientific in some ways. Like, all right, if 100 people said no to this, okay, that's a different story. But like, hey, a lot of people still like this. And there's like some tweaks about who we reach out to that will make this really special for the people that matter. Because again, product market fit means your product has, fit for a certain market, right? So that's all that together. It's not easy, but yeah.
Um, yeah, we can end there. Well, thank you so much for your time, Zach. Appreciate it.
Cool. All right, take care.